Well, it's 2 o'clock, and I think we're going to start. And I want to welcome everyone for coming out today. I also would like to do a little recognition for some of our board members that are here. So I can't see you now, so kind of raise your hands. Here's Ron Borner and Don Brandon and Bert Gordon and Becky Boston and here's Marilyn and Dennis, and do we have some more? Do we have anybody who wants to be on the board that can just raise their hand? We'll take you too. Okay, I'd just like to acknowledge that the board is very active in the Herrin Area Historical Society, and they come out, and there's a lot of things that we do in the community. And I'd also like to give some recognition to Lisa Carnegie over here. And I want everyone to kind of observe that she's filming this. Well, our programs for the last several years have been filmed, and they're on disc. And if there's any of the past programs, because we have one every month, that you might be interested in, they can be checked out through interlibrary loan on a CD and can be watched if you miss one and really want to see it. Also, I want to recognize Doris right back here does the Facebook and gets a lot of this publicity out. And Cheryl Trench over here who gets publicity out in the newspapers, and we appreciate that so much. And Susan, I want to recognize our librarian, our new librarian, so and now and here's Gordon Pruitt back here, another board member. I didn't know if I saw your hand or not. I had some eye things yesterday. I've just not taken the glasses off. I'm trying to find my way around. Dennis Agrippas, our newest board member, is going to do the introduction for our program today.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Agrippas. I'm the newest member of the board, so go easy on me. This is a special day, and I'd like to welcome everybody. We have our special guest here that many of you may know. He's the former Williamson County Sheriff, also a former instructor over at the John A. Logan College. He's a noted author of several books in the history of Southern Illinois, including today's subject, which is The Murder in the Heartland, Book 4. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Barry Stiller.
I always hate to use these things because I feel like I'm preaching. And I don't want to get struck by lightning, you know. Pass the plate, yeah, there you go. What I'll do, I think, is to talk to you about the murder in the Heartland, the stories that I've done, and some of the reasons why, and tell you about two or three of the stories, because there's a lot of them. And then just kind of give you a rundown on the other books that I have. And The Murder in the Heartland will take about 2 hours, and then the others will take about an hour, and then I'll take questions from the one or two that's left, which is probably the librarian, the one in charge of the history. Okay. All right. Well, I was county sheriff. I worked as a deputy, and then I worked over at John A. Logan, and then I was county sheriff from 82 to 89, and then I taught criminal justice forever at John A. Logan College and at the Crime Study Center. So, and I was involved in a number of the murder cases that was in this county, and also involved in the writing of cases from 75, I think I'm up to about 2011, and I certainly didn't get by any means all of them, but all the cases aren't just in Williamson County. Some of them was one out of Kentucky, a few out of Missouri that I've written about as well. and they're true crime. And the information that I have came from police records and from court records. This isn't James Patterson books. You know, I'm not creating a bunch of stuff to make up a, you know, some mysterious story, but I try to tell them in the sense of the way the crimes were investigated and, you know, as they went through. I started out, the series starts out in book one with John Paul Phillips. And John Paul Phillips was a serial murderer in this area. He lived in Carbondale. He lived several different places, but he lived in Carbondale at one time. And he murdered a girl over there who was a student. She lived in the same apartment complex that he did. And she was living there with a couple other students, and they went up north. They were from up north, going to school at Southern, and they went up north and left her there by herself. And he went down and he molested her and then brutally murdered her and threw her in the bathtub full of scalding water, you know, and left her. And so that was the first murder that occurred. And then after that murder occurred, he left the area. His dad was a construction worker at a construction business, and he took off and got him a job, and he went down south, I think to Alabama. Don't hold me to that, but he went down there for a while. He wanted to get out of the area. Well, you have to realize that when you're talking about the crimes, and you get a lot of, especially when you get crimes of violence where there's a lot of blood and a lot of contact with more than one person, 2 or 3 people, you get a lot of evidence. But the one thing that we didn't have at that time was DNA. You know, when it comes to blood, the only thing that you could determine with blood, if you got it, was if it was the same person's or somebody else's, or if it was an animal's blood, or if it was human blood, and the blood type. And the best that you could do for blood, in the sense of it being as evidence, would be if it was A negative. Because A negative was a very rare blood in the population. So if you go in and you find somebody else's blood and you got O positive, wow, you've got case solved. 65% of the population of the United States has got, you know, O positive. So, you know, you've only got to get it down to a few million people and you're on your road. So these were some of the kinds of things that you had that was, you know, that was different. The only piece of evidence that you had that could be identified to another person at that time was a fingerprint. Whatever you were born with, you're going to die with, is a fingerprint, and nobody else has got one like yours. And so that was the only thing they had. But anyway, they went in and, you know, they investigated it, and there was no witnesses. You know, they determined he did this early morning hours, nobody around, one thing or the other. So it goes down there, and then a year or so later, another girl was found. Her name was Sherry. And she was found in an apartment over in Carbondale. And she'd been stabbed and her throat cut, and, you know, just mutilated. And they, you know, there was still no evidence. So they had gone through trying to, you know, to come up with some sort of conclusion. Well, in the meantime, he goes out and with a couple of friends at the crab orchard and goes on a hiking, or not a hiking, camping trip. And this guy, you know, he had screwed loose, and he was the type of guy who'd be okay now, and then all at once he just flip out. And he ended up tying this guy to a tree, and he took the girl and had her just driving around for a long time. And he had beat this guy severely. He thought he'd killed him, but he wasn't dead. And then he took her and he was driving around, and the girl managed, after so long, this was several hours, she managed to jump out of the truck, and it was a fisherman coming along, and he took off. Well, they knew who he was, and so they turned him in, and so he ended up going to prison for this particular crime, kidnapping, and a bunch of other stuff. Well, then in 1981, because of an act that they had passed where they did an early release type thing on some of these people, he got out of prison on parole. And you've probably heard about this case, the shoemake case, the girl that was killed over on the railroad track. They solved that, 3 or 4 years ago. Well, he got out in 1981, and he was working on construction. As long as I went over to Southern as a student and the other, I don't know the name of the street, but it's one, if you go to the first stoplight at the mall, you take a left and you go down, you catch that road, and it goes right into SIU. You go across the railroad tracks. You know which one I'm talking about? Grant. Okay, Grant. Thanks. Anyway, I know where SIU's at. I can still remember that part. It's in Murfreesboro. Anyway, there was a radio station that was right there beside the railroad track. And all of that area through there was nothing but weeds and grown up, one thing and the other. And students who were living on this side would go through those areas as a path because it was easier to get through to go to school. So they had paths all over the place, and I had a picture of it one time. It looked like Ho Chi Minh Trail. There were trails everywhere, and that's what they called it because, the Vietnam War's going on, they called it Ho Chi Minh Trail. Well, this girl had a meeting there at this radio station. She was a student for that, and she left that night, and she went through that going back. And she ended up missing, and this was the shoemake girl, and they found her. Well, they suspected John Paul, and John Paul had actually worked on construction that day. They're on Grand, they were doing construction. So they went to talk to him. He had scratches on his neck and face and one thing and the other, and they talked to him. And he liked to do nothing better than to give the man a hard way to go, and the man was the police. And, he wouldn't fess up to anything, he was here, he was there, and they had him as a suspect, at the time, and they thought that he had done it. At any rate, that went on for a while, and then that was in 81, this was in 81 too, this was early 81, in late 81, he killed another girl. He went to the Holiday Inn, and she shunned him, and she went to a bar, I can't remember the name of the bar, down on the Strip. And he followed her down there. When she left, he followed her, got her, kidnapped her, took her out to his dad's business area, which was kind of real out at the time, and killed her. And then he took her to Oakville and dropped her off in a pond there. Well, they found her, and he always played tricks. He liked to drink these little bottles of Miller, the bottles, they used to make them, I don't know if they still do, and he'd take and stack those up at different places when he'd leave. See, they had a similarity of that could be him, the same person. But anyway, he did that. They still haven't caught him. They haven't got the evidence against him, but then he goes over one night, Carterville, and tries to kidnap a woman that's walking from the church across the street to her house. The church is right behind the police station. He just happened to see her, and I guess, it was right for him, so he tries to get her. She got away from him, started screaming around the police station, so they caught him. And when they caught him, he had a shovel, head roll, plastic bags, tape, all the stuff. Well, the prosecutor was able to get him like 40 years. He got him for that particular thing, and I forgot another one that was in there. He actually kidnapped another girl before he tried to get this one in Carbondale, put her in the trunk, took her to his dad's office, sexually molested her, and she was smart enough not fighting. She tried to talk to him like, he was really special to her and all this sort of stuff. And he's so messed up, he decides he's going to let her go. So he tapes her all up and ties her up, takes her back to where he had her, and let her go. And then he does this other lady before he got caught. Well, then the girl that he had let go could identify him. because she was able to, well, she saw him, he didn't, I think what he originally intended to do was kill her and then he let her go, but that's how he got his 40 years or what, you know, when he went to prison. So he's in prison, and while he's in prison, he gets a guy that's in prison with him, and he starts telling him stories. He starts telling him about the routes where he went, exactly what he did, because when you get these sociopaths who are involved in this, they relive it. It's part of what they do. And he went through the whole thing telling this story, and this guy begins to realize he's not playing. He's serious. So this guy gets a hold of the officials, get a hold of the police, so the police come in, and the guy comes in, he said, hey, look, you gotta get me away from this guy, you know, one thing, the other, and he starts telling the story. Well, the police had enough information, of course, they didn't share it with him, enough information, and the police will never tell you in a case what all they have. And they don't for that very reason, because most people can't keep their mouths shut, even the ones that commit something. And if you come up with the right thing, the only way you could have done it is to have been there or know something. I mean, that's basically the concept behind it. And so they realized that of what it was, the car he used. They went back and found the car that he had the body in, or the last body of the person that he, excuse me, that he murdered. And they found evidence in there, so they took him to trial, and he was given the death penalty. And it ended up that he died in 1991, I think it was, of a heart attack. Before he was on death row, he died in 1991. So he ended up doing at least 5. And there's other information in the story where they think that he had picked another person up and had killed him because he bought a new 44 Magnum and he just wants to see what it would do. And there's just, you know, there's several issues there. But he's one of the cases that I did and how the series starts out. And then I've got a number of other, you know, individualized cases that are in. But a couple of the other cases that might be of interest is the Esvito murder, the dentist in Murfreesboro. In that particular case, you had a situation where the dentist was Indian, his entire family was Indian, and him and his wife had gotten divorced. And she went to court and got permission to take her kids back to India for a visit. And he gets the idea that what she's really going to do is go back to India and take the kids and not come back. So he decides to hire somebody to kill her, his wife. And so everybody's concerned for, you know, all of her friends are concerned for her, and she goes and drops her kids off where they're supposed to be. She had like a 3-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son, and another one that was a little bit older, I think. And she drops all the kids off. She just disappears. About 2 or 3 days later, they found her out by a cornfield in Jackson County. And she'd been shot from both directions. It's like they opened it with an execution-style murder. They'd opened the door and shot her from both directions and killed her. And so they called him in, and they interviewed him to see if he was possibly the, you know, where he was at, what was going on, and all that sort of stuff. And they couldn't connect him and everything. And of course, they investigated. It goes on. So what he had actually done is he was a dentist. He was contracted to do the dentist work at Menard, and he connected with some people at Menard to get somebody to murder. He didn't pay him. So they contacted him because they had connections with people in Chicago, and they contacted him, wanted their money. He ain't gonna pay him. I ain't paying you. Laughed at it. I am not going to pay you. There's nobody in this town that ever believed I'd do something like that. Well, they kept going. He went to the police And said, these people are trying to get money from me. Well, yeah, he went to the police. So they went on and they got to investigate, and they always had a suspicion that it was him, and so they got into this whole investigation and got a hold of a lot of people, and they ended up taking him to trial in 1986. And that's, I think she was killed in 81 or 82. Took him to trial in like 86. And they presented, the prosecution presented all their evidence, and when it was over with, the defense attorney asked for a directed verdict. A directed verdict means, if you don't know what that means, see, once the state has presented their evidence, if you're a defense attorney for a person that's being accused, and they've presented the evidence, but their evidence isn't enough evidence to continue with the trial, like say, not prove the case, you can ask the judge for a directed verdict, which means that he's just going to throw it out. I mean, it's over. So that's what they did, and the judge gave a directed verdict because he said all the evidence that they had was based on hearsay. So he wasn't to be held for murder any longer. Well, the problem is that his boys were in the courtroom the whole time that this went on and listened to all the evidence, and the younger boy was very close to his mother, and he realized, although it was a directed verdict, that his dad had killed his mother. Well, they get out of trial and they go on, and so the police are coming down Highway 51, and they see this car sitting over the side, and they get out and go up to check it at about 2 o'clock in the morning one morning, and the dentist is in there, dead. And so, long story short of that whole scenario of all the things that happened in that case is that that younger boy killed his dad. He talked another kid in with him, and while his dad was asleep in the dentist chair, he shot him, killed him, because he did that to his mother and put him in the car and staged him. Long story short, he and the other children ended up with their mother and dad, and he ended up going to prison for the murder. He eventually got out. I don't know how long. He went for, I mean, it's just, that one's a really, sad story. So at any rate, that's one of the cases. And one of the other cases was one I was involved with. When I was sheriff, I had a friend who was a precinct judge in the precinct where I lived. I lived out south of Marion. And she comes in my office one day. She's sitting there talking to me, and her daughter had been killed in a car accident in St. Charles, Missouri. And she comes in one day and she's talking to me, and I told her how sorry it was, the condolences and one thing, and she said, well, he killed her. I said, what? She said, he killed her. I said, who killed her? She said, her husband. He killed her. I know he killed her. I said, I thought she was killed in a car accident. Well, that's what they said, but I know he killed her. Well, one of those things, how families are sometimes, you don't quite like the particular person, and let it go. I mean, not that there's anything that you do at St. Charles, Missouri, one thing or the other. I never thought anything else about it. And about 2 years later, I'm sitting in the office one day, I get a call. This guy says, I'm Sheriff Eubanger from St. Charles County. I need your help. I was, okay, what can I do for you? And he said, we have a lady that's buried in a cemetery in your county, and we need to exhume the body because we think she's been murdered. Who is this? And he told me, Sharon Williams is who it was. And it's like, wow. I guess Mom was right, maybe. So we go through the process, and they exhumed the body, and there was a lady that was a criminal pathologist up in St. Louis that had solved one of two or three of the top murder cases in the country based on forensic evidence at the time. And Sheriff Eubanger, who thought that he had something to do with this particular crime, was watching TV one night and saw a particular case that she had where a guy had murdered a guy and made it look like a car accident. So he goes to her and tells her the story of what he thinks. And what the problem was this car, it went off of a road. Central School Road was the name of the road. It went off the road and it was in an embankment like this. Head first, she's in the car by herself, but all her injuries in the back of her head. You know. Anyway, what happened was is that when the ambulance people get there, appears that it's a car accident, they take her to the hospital. She's in the hospital with the doctor. She wasn't dead at the time. 2 or 3 days later, she died. The doctor signs off on the death certificate as accident. Family takes her down. That crosses the line to Illinois. You start getting into some real stuff when you start crossing lines and all that when you're trying to get something done. And buries her. And so he had all of this information. People had brought. Well, what really, I take that back. What really brought the attention to the case was a guy come up missing in January in 4 below zero weather, and he supposedly went out to jog and never come back. And what had happened was this guy that had killed her, killed him, put him in his septic tank. And then he went and he goes and he gets all this concrete, puts it out over that, and, and it does all sorts of things. But the point being is this particular case, they come down there to get the body, to take it back to St. Louis, because Mary Case says, if I can examine the body, I can tell you whether it was an accident or not. Okay? So she goes and she gets it, she said it wasn't an accident. So they're going to take it to court. And all the legal aspects of exhuming the body and everything was wrong, so nothing can be taken into court. So they had to go through the whole process again and do it the second time, which the second time they got it, they did it, got everything that they needed. Long story short, it ends up that he was convicted because what happened was they suspected after a while on the other guy that he was in the septic tank because he was missing, and then mysteriously the husband's wife, who was killed in the car accident, was going with a woman whose husband come up missing. And so they got to checking it, and they found out that he went out with his septic tank and went out and made a big concrete slab and put over the septic tank and all sorts of stuff, so they couldn't get in there. But and they suspected that he was in there. The guy that was missing was in there, but they didn't have probable cause to get a search warrant until this other information found. Then they got the search warrant when I found him. So he ended up going to prison. It was a long, long story. So those are some of the types of stories and the cases, excuse me for calling it, but the cases that I have go all the way through to, I think the latest one was 2011. One of those was here in Herrin. It's actually up at Freemansburg. But I've got one that I've just got to mention in the last book, and that's the newest book that I've got, is that it's a case I've got a picture of him here, Joseph Dunn. He was 8 years old, and guy beat him to death. He was going with a gal, and she went to Florida, and he was beating him with a belt. He just kept doing it, he was a little guy. He ended up beating him to death, and then after he beat him to death, he was in contact with mom. One thing, he let her know. And he ended up stuffing her in a suitcase. Stuffing the kid in a suitcase and was going to take that. And I think, you know, they never really proved it, but she was down there trying to get a car to come back to get him. They was all going to leave. He was probably going to get rid of Bobby, but they got caught. And that case is in there, and through a lot of the court records, and you know, one thing or the other. I don't want to get into sheriff, and I don't want to get into some of this stuff because I've seen a lot, and it's just how vulnerable people can be. You know, we all want to believe that we live in Mayberry, RFD, but we don't. Now, the world's not coming to an end like Donald Trump says, but at the same time, you know, there's vulnerability there. People have to know where and what, and, you know, what's going on. I'll never forget one time when I was over Southern teaching, and this girl came up to me and she says, I gotta tell you, she said, I read your book. Well, you didn't like it? She said, it scared me to death. I said, why it scared you to death? She said, I was getting drunk at the bar and walking home by myself down these same streets you're talking about. She said, I'm scared to go outside. And I said, good. Now some cop will have to come and pick you up because you're stupid. You know? And the problem is there, I mean, you know, it can happen. And you know, people need to be aware. And it's just, I had to do it for some of what I've seen. I just felt like they need to be told. There's a total of 20 cases in book 1, 10 in book 2, 12 in book 3, and 4 in book 4, because one case is pretty long. And by the number of cases, doesn't mean you don't get the same read. It's just some cases longer than the other. And that doesn't mean there isn't more murders. One of the cases in book 1 of John Paul Phillips is 5 murders in that. So that's those particular books. And then I've written 15, and I've got the 16th ones due by September the 1st. I hate crunch time, but that's the way it is. But I've got a few other books. I've written true crime books, but I just wanted to mention the others. I've got 2 books here that are Vietnam books, and those pertain to my own personal experience. I got a sheriff's memoir that also pertains to that. And I got 2 or 3 other military books of World War II Korea. I don't have all of my books with me, these are all the ones that I had. But one of the things that I did besides that, and talk about my own experiences, both in Vietnam and sheriff, is I did personal stories of individuals. That was in World War II in Korea, and you know, a variety of that, did their individualized stories, and interviewed them and did their stories. And I've got the ones, the 3 that I've got here were guys who were POWs. One of them was both on Japanese and German side, and the other was just German side. And then the Korean book is those as well. I had a couple of people ask, just so you know, if there's somebody that might want to get one. The Vietnam Angel of Death, the sheriff book, $10 each, and all the others are $15. No taxes unless you work for the IRS. And so with that said, I guess I'll leave it open for a couple of questions if anybody has any. Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Spiller, all of your murder books then are
They're nonfiction.
so they're true.
Yes, every bit of it's true. They're all true crime. Yeah.
You said this is about one murderer?
No.
Suspect, or
No.
Oh, there is a Heartland, so you more than one murderer?
Yes. Yes, there is. There's 20 cases in the first book. There's 10 cases. What was that add up to? 20 and 10 and 12, 42, 45. There's 45 different cases altogether in all 4 books. And You don't, and the other thing is they don't have to be read in order. You know, there's not like, I mean, this isn't some, like a series where you gotta read book 1 before you read book 2. You read whichever book you want first. If you don't want to, I guess, go get Nora Roberts or something. That's like kids, man.
Could you talk a little bit about, in your experience, how the investigation itself has changed over several decades that you've been observing crime? I mean, how do they approach things now? We know there's DNA, but...
Well, it's just a whole series of a lot of things. All the technology, the DNA, everything that they have just really helps tremendously in coming up with the physical evidence that you need. Physical evidence, I mean, you know, I can go interview you about what you've seen. I got an eyewitness. Well, know something? Eyewitnesses that see something happen, 2 out of 3 are wrong. Every time. And and it's not that you mean to be. Go to school and have your kid, while you're sitting in the car, walk out to get in your car and see how many times she walks out before she actually walks out. Dress alike, hair's alike, all these different things. People will see something, you know, the first time. Or our perception of what we see versus what actually happened. I used to do it in criminal investigation class. It's the most fun thing I ever did. I'd be in, you know, I had all these Clint Eastwoods, you know, it's gonna be Thomas. They'd all be in there and they're all telling me all, you know, one thing. And I said, you know what? You couldn't identify, boy, I could, one thing the other. The whole time I'm talking, I'd have somebody run in the room, dress a certain way, do some sort of stuff and go back out. And I said, okay, now, give me a description of that person just in here. If I had 30 people in the room, I'd have 30 different descriptions. I'd hand it back. And I said, this is the kind of thing you're up against. And it's not an intentional thing, it's just the way we perceive a lot of times because we want to be right, you know, oftentimes. But in answer to your question, it is training, a lot more training, a lot more education, and the ability to go in. They've specialized more. There's more money in the department so that you can get things done that you didn't before. Basically, that's the changes that I've seen, and the technology, the ability to get information as quickly as they can get information is important. Used to, whenever I was investigating, and my son said this one time when I was a kid, and I'll tell you, and we don't speak anymore. He was looking at this movie, and it was black and white. I don't know why it was black and white. And I walked by and he said, Dad, they have cars to use in school. That's not funny. But he did. But in a day, whenever I was doing when we were doing the investigation, you had to send stuff to the crime lab and wait for weeks. We had a case in Herrin where we thought somebody had done a particular crime and we had the evidence. We thought we had them. And we had to send it off and wait for 3 weeks before we could get an answer on the evidence because they were so far behind. Look at the guys, I mean, they don't necessarily do that, but the technology, look at the whole situation when they took bin Laden down. They did DNA on the spot. And a lot of police departments and this sort of thing are able to do that. The ability to be able to analyze and to get stuff processed and that sort of thing is just much better, and it's important because you've got to have it to go forward. You can't arrest people, you can't put them off the street because you think. You can arrest somebody on probable cause, which is just about a 30% scale on the scale. But once you're done with that, you better come up with something more than that. You're going to have to turn them loose. You know. So I hope that kind of answers. Yes, ma'am.
In any of these books, is the crime where the lady was didn't that, in the restaurant there in Marion, and killed. and
Donna
got
Cooper.
refuge? Huh?
Cooper?
Was that in any of those books?
It's in the sheriff's book. And I may have mentioned it in one of the other books, but the reason that that case, the cases that I have are solved cases. Cases don't get closed because they don't solve them. You know, the cases of where murders have happened, they don't throw the files away and forget about it because they couldn't come up with it. And you generally can't get that information. So I've got some, because I was sheriff when that happened. Sorry. I was sheriff when that happened. And it happened at the steakhouse there. What was it? Ponderosa Steakhouse. And I knew her dad well, and you know, one thing, the other. And it was never solved. As a matter of fact, still an ongoing thing. But it's actually, it wasn't a sheriff's case, a Marion case. It happened in the city, and they handled the investigation, one thing, the other. But part of that's in there, a little bit about that is in there. Because I was there when they found the body, one thing, the other. I talked about that a little bit, yes, ma'am.
Are there very many unsolved cases in Williamson County at this time?
Well, I'm sure there's unsolved. I don't keep up with all of it anymore, but most of the cases are solved. I'm sure there's some that aren't, some old cases. But what they do have now that they didn't before is a cold case squad that deals with a lot of these old cases that are around now and try to solve them. And the downside to it is that the longer the cases go, the more difficult it becomes to solve. But to give you an example, the Shoemake case on the railroad track, DNA is one that solved that. They had a suspect that they had in mind. They couldn't hold him because they didn't have any evidence. He went back to Chicago. They always had him as a suspect. They couldn't connect it. They had went into the apartment that he was at, got some cigarette butts. He left DNA on them, one thing or the other, and they connected the crime. And that's the big thing this day and time. And you know, they only do that with, not only do that, teeth marks, all this different stuff. I mean, they're getting it down to the nitty gritty. It's hard to get by with at least those types of crimes where there is physical contact, one thing or the other. So anyway, do I have other questions? Sir?
Can I ask you about an unsolved crime in Williamson County?
Yeah?
Tag Anderson at the Pinnock Motel about 30 years ago.
Yeah? We handle that.
No
No,
results.
no. Know exactly what he did, and he was shot with a shotgun. And you can't trace that. You can't trace those pellets to a specific gun. You can come up with a type, but, you know, that goes back to like the old positive. Wow, we got a 12 gauge. Let's get them, you know. Everybody's got a 12 gauge, you know, but never was able to come up with anything. That was the only thing that was there. There was never any witnesses. The only thing that we figured that he heard something. He went back there, because he had a little garage back there, kind of, he went back there. Somebody shot him, obviously. And we don't know the reason for that. And I mean, we worked that and worked it and worked it, and just never was able to come up with anything. Hoping that maybe someone would cut loose with what may have happened, but nobody ever did. You know, usually somebody will open up somewhere. These guys, you know, a lot of them drink and get in the bar, and then they get to thinking, you know, get to drinking, and then they start telling the guy next to them or somebody over here or whatever. Okay, other questions? Well, if anybody wants a book, they're for sale. And if you don't, I'm glad to see y'all.
Herrin, what was the limitation time you can keep evidence? Can you go back 50 years?
Oh, yeah, if they can keep it, they'll keep it as long as they can keep it. I mean, you know, if the stuff will hold, and there's been cases that they've gone back. In a number of cases, some of these guys have been in prison for rape and one thing and the other, but they have found they weren't the ones that done it. You know, and I mean, they were in for, I think they had one in down at Muddy, had been in for 22 years or something like that, and they had some evidence and they kept that. And at the time, they didn't have DNA, but then they had it and they ran that out in. And the other thing that helps is that you get, like in the rape cases, you have a situation where you have a rape and a rape and a rape and a rape, so you think you got a serial rapist. And they get some guy and they catch him, and then they find out he raped this one, he raped the other three. And that's important, you know, because a lot of times you think you've got the guy that did them all, but you know you don't, you know. But yes, ma'am.
What about the two cases in Jackson County that continue to surface just in the last year, the Justice for Molly Young? Are you familiar with that one? And then the student from SIU, his last name started with a B, and he was found dead in the forest.
Oh, yeah.
Both of those are personal family people who continue to keep that, you know, in the public eye, where the police are going on another direction. Do you think that would ever be solved?
Well, in some instances, and I don't know everything about those cases, so I don't want to speak on behalf of the police or anything like that. But I do know in one of the cases, I remember the thing with Woods, don't remember all the detail of it, but I remember one of the cases got involved and they thought she might have committed suicide note, all this sort of stuff, one thing or the other. One of the problems that you have with anybody in a family, and I've seen this happen several times, is that people do not want to accept the fact that they got somebody like me sitting here looking at him that's smiling today, that is my brother, that I love, that walked into that other room and picked up a gun and shot himself. And people do it. I mean, I don't know, you know, sometimes people are depressed, sometimes a variety of things. But what I'm saying is that sometimes they won't accept it, so the police aren't doing what they need to do, kind of thing, you know. And I'm not saying that that's the case there, but I do know this. I know that they tried because they said that the police was covering it up and all this. That family went to like Nancy Grace, and they had the other gal that's on there. They'll eat your lunch. You ain't gonna hide nothing from them. They'll eat your lunch, and they got all of the information, and they wouldn't do a thing with it. So I don't know what they got, but they got it from the police and one thing and the other, and they wouldn't touch it. And that's just, if there's anything that's there with Nancy Grace and them, she lives for it. You know, they do, and that's what they're there for, to make the police accountable in cases. And so, again, I'm not trying to say that that's, I'm just, I've had a couple of times where I dealt with a number of years ago where there was suicide. There's no doubt whatsoever that it was a suicide, and family just would not accept it. And I understand that. I wouldn't want to accept it when my kids took their own life, you know, or something like we don't want to accept it. Because it seemed like there's got to be something that you could have done better than just take your life, you know. But there's some people who get to that point sometimes, and it happens.
I heard there was a death over in Marion. I think it was in early 70s, that this girl was down here at Paris Tavern. And I don't know if she was there, and I knew a couple of other guys that were there at that time. But anyway, they left there, and they found her right there on Crab Orchard Creek on the South Market Street Road. at the bridge there. They destroyed, she was dead apparently, and they threw her out the window of the car or out the side, but she didn't fall in the river. She got it hung on the bridge. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I know which case you're talking about.
But I never did hear any, they never did.
They never did solve the case, they know the
Never
guy
brought
that
it
done
to
it, but, you know, there again, they never had the physical
They
evidence.
thought they had to, but
Yeah,
I just never did hear another word on that at all. And one I can remember that they never never finished it. Nobody ever admitted or caught, figured from that, a long time ago.
yes, ma'am.
I'll be careful how I word this. In light of today's society in the United States and the police killings that are going on, were any of your cases, or were you ever involved with a case where the cop was killed? And you had to prove
No,
criminal intent?
no, no.
I was also wondering, you may not know, but when was the last time that a cop was killed in Williamson County or Southern Illinois? I was trying to relate our situation to the rest of the United States.
I don't know, we had a Marion policeman that was shot a few years back.
Okay.
Got shot in the hand. We had a fireman that was killed over in Hearst.
Herrin Fire.
Oh, Herrin Fire Department,
They
okay.
were over there.
Yeah, okay, Herrin Fire Department,
Kevin Reveal was his name.
okay. But other than that, I can't recall, and that doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I think I would have heard of it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
In 1983, there were 2 officers killed at the Marion Federal Prison on the same day.
Yes, yes. I know. Just a couple, 2 or 3 hours apart, wasn't it? I'll tell you, I had, I'm trying to think that, I had one of the guys that saw that, one of the officers that saw that. I can't remember what the setting was as to why I was with him or dealing with him.
There were 2 other officers stabbed that same day also.
That's what it was one of the guys that was stabbed. He had been stabbed, and this was sometime later. He's messed up. He, you know, it really, I don't mean messed up from the stabbing, it really, had some issues from it for a while. But that's understandable, even if you weren't attacked, seeing that type of thing, have effect on it. Was that the only 2 that was killed? Wasn't there one after that, or 1 or 2 after that, or was that it?
There was, years before that, there was an officer by the name of Jarvis that was killed in D cell block.
Okay.
What I did for a living, I had to teach a little bit about forensics because we would be in the OR.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I hope ever anyone has to see anything like what you described. But if something came about, are there some things that people could do to help preserve evidence until the investigators get there? I'm thinking of, a lot of people put something in a plastic bag when it shouldn't go in a plastic bag.
That's true. Probably the best thing to do if you're ever in a situation is just try to keep the scene, as best you know what that scene is, untouched. And that could be a lot of different scenarios as to the way it could be. And this wasn't a crime scene. One of the things used to just drive me nuts for a long time is go on a case and pull up an accident, car accident. And you get somebody to get out, and the first thing they want to do is grab the person that's in the car and drag him out of the car. And lay him on the highway. You know, it's like, I was doing that one night, and this guy grabbed this guy and pulled him out, and I said, you need to leave that person alone. I was in the Navy for 30 years. I said, I don't give a damn what you was in. Leave the body alone. The guy's got broken bones, you know. You start taking people that are injured, and they might be okay. That's why they got ambulances. You're not going to do them any good but drag them out of the car unless the car's on fire. I mean, if there's smoke and the car's on fire, get them out of there the best you can. But it's the same sort of thing, you know. People wants to go in, you know, we'll take us the room, for example, and you come in, you hope that never happens, you find a dead body in here, and somebody happens to come in and it appears that the person's been dead. You need to secure this scene. And the reason you need to secure this scene is if there's anybody in the library and they hear you got a dead body in there, they'll be in here. Same thing with car accidents. Used to have those, you know, the road would be blocked. You're trying to get people through and everybody's coming down. Is his head on? I'm serious. It's what they do, you know. I don't know why they want to see that, but I guess it's just the human curiosity. But you start having everybody coming in the room, you know, one thing. Then the next thing, you know, somebody wants to touch something, you know, or maybe want to touch them to see if they're dead. Their head's over here, you know, one thing, but they want to touch it to see, you know. So you got all those kinds of, you know, that just try to protect the area as best you can and not touch anything until whoever it is can, you know, get there. Is the only suggestion I would have.
How many more books do you have up your sleeve?
I've got one that I'm doing right now, it's due by September the 1st, and I don't know what I'm going to do after that. Oh, I have one other thing before everybody leaves. Do not call the librarian new anymore. It'll get you in trouble. She is not new. She is going to be here a year when?
August 17th.
August 17th, okay. She's not new anymore. I said new, and she let me know she's not new. And somebody that's on the board said, our new librarian. I went, boy, you're in trouble.
Newest library.
The newest librarian. Okay, well, thank you.